Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm going to be building on the date and time clock system that we made in a previous video. And I'm going to build on that by showing you how I've created this, the calendar system, which is obviously, again, inspired by Stardew Valley. So you can see here that we've got spring, and it's currently the first day of spring, Monday the 1st. And you can see that as it just goes over to the 2nd, it's now the second day of spring. And we can have what I've called in the back end key dates, and these key dates show up on the calendar. You can have an image and a bit of text. So today is John's birthday, so tomorrow on the 3rd of spring it'll be John's birthday. It's Abby's on the 12th, and on the 21st it's the spring fair. And I've got these buttons up here that let us flick between the different pages, so pages of the calendar. So obviously we've got summer, that's Lionel's birthday. That's the longest day of the year on the summer solstice over on summer. Autumn, we've got the Mysterious X. This little sprite looks like an assassin, so I thought it was a Mysterious X. They turn another year older. We've got the Autumn Fair, which is going to run all day. Sir Gallant, Prince of the little town, he turns another year older as well. And it's time to get spooky for the pumpkin harvest. Over on winter, we've got Laura Deserves Something Nice, Right? It's the Firefly Festival on the 14th of winter, and then finally Christmas Fest or Christmas Day. So that's kind of showing off the calendar. There's a bit of a time lapse now of me actually making this. It was quite a lot of fun. I made some of the sprites I got for free off Itch. Yeah, let's just jump into the code and I'll show you how this is all working. Hello, I'm just interrupting this little video to say that Unity is having a one last sale of 2021. It starts at 9 PM PT on December the 12th, and it continues all the way through January 11th next year. It's going to be over 8,000 assets at 50% off, and if you just can't help yourself and you put over $150 worth of stuff in your basket, you can get an extra 5% off by using code HELLO2022. That code doesn't last until the end of the sale in January. It actually ends on New Year's Eve at midnight PST. One asset I would highly recommend is Peak. It's an editor interface tool. I've done a video on it actually, so if you want to look at that video, I'll put a card up here. But if that goes on sale, I would highly recommend getting it. All of the information about all of this is going to be in the description below. But with that said, let's just get straight back to the video. So just very briefly, this is the time manager, which I made in a previous video. I've put it in its own namespace just so we can, because I like to export these and use them elsewhere in my own utilities class. Outside of the time manager, the main thing for the previous video was this date time struct, and this contains a reference to a day, a date, an hour, minutes, season, year, and lots of other stuff. Again, if you want to completely follow along with this, you'll have to do the previous video. But if you just want to see how I've kind of worked it all together, feel free to carry on watching. So the first object is I needed to define a key date, something that will show up on the calendar. So I've got a key dates scriptable object here. It's very simple. So the create asset menu name, time date system, key dates. And then we've got public class, key date, scriptable object. And I'm not actually using this, but we can use this to check whether an event runs every year. If it doesn't, and we're then in year 2, we can probably fill around, just don't show that. But the main thing is we've got a date time, which is a key date, which again is this struct that I've made, public struct date time, which contains all of this. So we've got a key date. And I've had to get this to show up as a scriptable object, I've had to serialize these private fields so we can set them in the inspector. Actually, in code, you access the properties, not the fields, but if we want to assign it in the inspector, we need to serialize fields. A sprite is the thumbnail that shows up, so like the little avatar or the little pumpkin, and then the description is what shows up in the panel on the bottom right corner. If you wanted to, you could have the description show up in a tooltip, so as you hovered over it, like a normal, tooltip showed up on your mouse. I didn't want to get too complicated with a tooltip video, so I've just put the panel there to show that. So the way key dates work is if I go over to my scripts folder, scriptable objects, key dates. So you can see that here I've got a lot of scriptable objects. So the description here is Abby's birthday. I think this is Abby, the thumbnail. Again, I've not ended up using the yearly bit yet. It should be simple to implement. But the main thing is this key date. So we could set a time, but just to show up on the calendar, it's not necessary. We just need to know the date and the season. And again, if it isn't a yearly thing, you could put in a year and fill the stuff out that way. But that's it. So you can see that we've got a good range of different dates here. And they're just as simple to make a new one as go create time date system, key dates, and we could say, I don't know, the Fire Festival. And then we could put in the description, it was a scam. Under thumbnail, do I have anything? I mean, the fireflies will probably work for that one. I'll just stick one of these sprites in just so you can see it working. Let's go for this guy. Why not? He looks like the leader of the Fire Festival. Why not? And this can occur on, let's say, the 10th of autumn. And then over on my calendar, I've just got an array of, I've got a list, sorry, of my key dates, and I can just drag in Fire Festival, which is a new date, hit play, and then we can go and see. So when was that? So that was the, there you go, the 10th of autumn. It was a scam. It's the Firefly Festival. So that's just how easy it is to add a new date into the system. So this calendar script is kind of the next point of call for us to go and take a look at. So if I go over to our calendar controller, so here, let's just get rid of these. So one of the main things I'm actually doing here is I'm using system.link to sort the dates. And that's kind of key for getting them in order. This list, I can put them in any order, and then the link function that I use just sorts them by, first by season, and then by date, and then we can filter them through from that. We don't have to put them in the order we want them to appear on the calendar, so it just makes it a bit easier. So we're using link, and I'll show you that in a second. So the first thing is I've got a public list of calendar panels, which is each of these individual, each of these squares is a calendar panel, and it has its own script on it just to keep a reference to its sprite and the date and the highlight around it as well. So we've got a list of those, and I'll go through that script in a minute. Yeah, we've got a list of the key dates, which you've seen. We can just shove more and more key dates in there. We've got the Text Mesh Pro, which has got the season text. So here where it says spring, we can change that text. And then because now this probably isn't the best way to do it, but it was the easiest way I found. So we've got this description text down here, and I wanted to set it from the actual calendar panel so I could use onPointerExit, and I needed to access that. Now you can't, if you've got a static text mesh, if you've got a public static field, you can't assign it in the inspector. So what I've done is I've got a public set description text, which I can assign in the inspector. And then in start, I just set the description text to the inspector variable. So we look at our calendar here. We've got set description text. That's just this description text. And then I'm just passing that reference over to our static variable on start. So that's assigned. Again, there's probably a better way of doing that. That was the easiest that I found. So then I've got an int to track our current season view. So at 0, we're looking at spring. 1, we're looking at summer. 2, we're looking at autumn, and 4, we're looking at 3, sorry, we're looking at winter. And then I've got a date time, which again is that struct that we made, and that's just the previous date time. I'll show you why in a second. So then we subscribe to the time managers on date time changed. So you know this ticks every so often, and it updates the time. And when the time changes, so we advance time, so we change the time. And then we invoke our onDateTimeChanged event, and we pass in the new date time, so everything can keep track of what the current time is. So we subscribe and unsubscribe from that in our awake and undisable functions. So then in start, I'm just setting the description text to the set description text. I'm defaulting it to nothing, so it disappears. I'm assigning our previous date time to whatever the date time is in the time manager. So for example, the reason for that is that I can go on my time manager and I can set a new time. I could set it was the 2nd of spring, 2nd of summer, for example, and I could start the game in that time. So this just grabs the current time. And then here's the link function. So we sort our dates, which is sorting through this list of key dates here. So if I go over to our sort dates function, you can see that I've got key dates equals key dates. So I'm going to order by the season, and then I'm going to order it by date. And then I'm going to send that to a list and put it back in our key dates list. So you can see that working here. So, you know, these are in all sorts of weird kind of different orders. They're just the orders that I've made them in. So these were just the order I've made them in and I've assigned them. They're in just a random order. But if I hit play, you can see that this updates. So it's John's birthday first. So that's the 3rd of spring. And then Abby's is the 12th of spring. And then it's the spring fair on the 21st. So these are all the spring dates. And then we can go over to the summer dates. And this is this. So Lionel's birthday, the summer fair, summer solstice, etc. So that's what that function does. That's why I like using these link functions. They're just, you know, that's so great to read and you know exactly what it's doing. If you want to learn more about Lambda functions and link, I highly recommend this video by TaroDev. Some really good stuff in there and kind of a good sort of primer to get you started with that. So yeah, so that sorts our dates. So that's the first thing in start. And then it fills the panel and fill panel takes in the season. So it fills the panels with the events from that season. So I'm going to fill panels with season 0. So if I go over to fill panels, so this is going to take in a season called _season, and then it's just going to set the text at the top to that season by string. And again, in the time date video that I did, I explained about how enums can be assigned in values, and they are just values under the hood. So we've got our season here. So spring is 0, summer's 1, autumn's 2, winter is 3. So if I pass in an int as a season, they correlate to these. So when I'm passing in 0 here, I'm saying fill the panel with all of the events from season 0, which is spring. And then we've got a bit of a loop here. So this is there's 28 panels assigned in our list, which are each of these squares include so everything up to the blue highlight is a panel, and there's 28 of them, Monday through to Sunday. And I know that, you know, the 1st is a Monday, the 28th is a Sunday, and it'll just fill them in between, all the dates. I'll go through the actual UI setup of that as well in a second. So to fill the panels, we need to loop through all of the panels. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up the date. What that does is that changes the number from kind of, as you see over here, the all 1. That'll change it 1 through 28. Seems silly to do it every time, but it also does a few other things. So we set the assigned date time to null, and we null out the sprite and the color as well. So that just clears all the panels before we start. So if there is an event on one day in spring and it's not on, there's nothing on the same day in summer, we just know that that's going to be cleared. So here I'm just checking whether we're looking at the current season. So if it's currently season, so if it's currently spring over on our clock, or in this case winter, if it was winter and I was looking at the winter panel, then we just need to we need to show the highlight for the panel of the date that it is. So with our current season view, so if we're looking at spring, if that matches our date time season of the current date and time, and if I+1 is equal to the date, so obviously our dates go from 1 to 28, but this calendar panel array is 0 based, so this goes from 0 to 27. So if we're looking at panel 2, index 2 of this, that's actually the 3rd panel along, which is the one that represents day 3. So we need to make sure that that matches this, and if it does, then we can show the highlight. And then for every other kind of instance of that, we need to make sure we hide the highlight if it's not already hidden. You can see here that, you know, we're on day 1 of spring, and then we go over to summer. Day 1, the highlight is hidden, so we're not, you know, we've checked we're not on the right season. If I go back over to spring, every other panel has its highlight hidden, but it is day 1, which is index 0, but it's day 1, so we need to do I+1. You can see that as it's gone over, we've just changed the highlight over to spring, to the 2nd of spring. And then finally, after we've done all that, we've set up the dates, we've turned the highlight off and on, depending on if it's the actual day that we're looking at. So I'm going into a for each loop, and for every date in our key dates list, which by this point has been sorted, and this is this key dates list here, so this is our sorted list. For every date in our list, if the panel that we're currently looking at in our loop +1, so again it's 0 based, So if there's something on the first day of the month, we're looking at I0 plus 1, so that's the first date. And if it's the current season view that we're looking at, and if that date's correlating season, so we've put an event on the 2nd of summer, we're currently, viewing our summer panel, the summer window, then yep, there's a date, so we can assign the key date to that panel, which we pass in the key date through. We assign its date time key date. We change the sprite to the date times thumbnail, and we change the color to white so it's visible. So that's what that is doing there. So that's kind of the opposite of this function. So in here, we're nulling out the date time, we're nulling out the sprite, we're hiding it. So we clear the panels and then we reassign where there is a date to that panel. And then finally on the calendar controller, we've got 2 buttons, which you've seen at the top, and that's just to go to the next season or the previous season. So what that does is it increments our current season view by 1. And if that goes over 3, which is the max, then we're going to flip back round. So if we're at winter and we go next, it'll go to spring. And then we're just going to fill the panels with our current season view. Again, like cast as a season. And on the previous season, again, we're going to go back 1. And if that goes below 0, then current season's view is 3. So if we're looking at spring and we hit the back button, it's going to go to winter. Then we're just going to fill the panel, which is what we've just gone through there. So then over on our calendar panel script, again, this is quite a simple script. So I've got a public key date, which is our date time, which is our key date here. I could probably rename this to make this, this should be our key date. So we've got a key date called key date. We've got the text mesh pro reference to the date, which is the number. And then we've got our image panel, which is where the sprite goes. And then we've got the highlight around that as well. So on awake, I'm just going to make sure the highlight is hidden. And then we've got a hide highlight and show highlight. So that's, the blue kind of square around it if the date is that date that we're looking at. And then, I've already briefly shown these. So assign key date is we set our key date to our key date, and then we look, and then we change the sprite to that, and we change the color to white so we see it. This is to hide it if there isn't a date on that panel. And the reason we're storing a reference to our key date is so we can get its description for on pointer exit and on pointer enter. Like I said, this probably isn't the best way to go about it, but as I enter a panel that has an event in it, it sets the text of our of the description on the bottom right corner to whatever the description is, and then you can see that when we on pointer exit, we're just going to set it to null, so it hides again sort of as we leave. So there are other like I said, we could have probably had a tooltip like that floats and follows the mouse around, which is what I will probably do when I develop this further for the game I'm working on. But for now, it just shows up in that bottom right corner. So that's it for the scripting, sort of, all of the scripting. But I'll just quickly show you how the UI is set up as well. Just because I thought it was quite interesting. So we've got the clock up here. I'll just hide the clock. So the description is literally just a panel, and then the description text, which is the text on it. And we set that as I've shown. We've got our 2 buttons, which are the forward and back button. So that's these. These do that on next season and on previous season. We've got the season text up at the top. We've got the day text parent, which has got a grid layout group in it. And then each of these is evenly spaced. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. They're just the text blocks here. Which has the grid layout group of a fixed row of 1, so that forces them to not loop round. We've just got the 1 row, and it fits perfectly. That's controlled by the cell size and going from middle center. So I can control the cell size. I could probably put that to 260, and the text is all center aligned as well, so it fits kind of nicely over the column. It could be probably tidied up a bit more. And then I've got the date blocks, which are these day panels, which I built one, made it a prefab, and then added it back in for, there's 28 of them to fill in the calendar. This date block this date block parent has a grid layout group as well. got fixed column counts, so the 7 days in a week, so the 7 columns, and then I've put in the 28 and that sorted itself out. And again, they're from middle center. And each day panel has a calendar panel script on it, and it just has a reference to its date text, its highlight, which is the blue square again, and then it has a mask parent, which is this. So we've got an image, a square image, which just sits there, but then it's got the mask component on it with show mask graphic disabled. And the reason for that is that if I remove the mask, you see the sprite sort of sticks outside of the frame. And I basically wanted the sprite to be hidden kind of inside the frame. And then I've got the image, so, it's masked to the frame. So that's all assigned in the calendar panel, and that's a prefab. So if I change anything on one, I can update the prefab and it'll filter down to them all. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. There are some improvements to this that I could make. So for example, we could, when we get to winter, instead of just looping back to spring, we could show spring of year 2, so we can increase the year that we're looking at. And then that would allow for us to use this yearly function. So for example, we could have in year 4 of the game, we could have an Olympics, and that only happens every 4 years. So that wouldn't be a yearly event, but birthdays and festivals and stuff, they probably would be a yearly event. So, if I did it that way, where it goes into year 2, as it goes into year 2, it would check all of the dates, and if that date matches, and if the bool was checked, then it'd fill it in, because it doesn't matter what year it is. And if it's not checked, it'd check the current year that we're looking at versus the key dates year. And then if that matches, it'd fill it in. So there's lots of other stuff. So as well, you could have a start date in our key dates. You could have a start date and an end date with times. Then you could have them, connected over if you wanted to. It's infinitely expandable. But yeah, I just thought I'd show how I made this and how I got through it. As always, the project files for this will be over on my Patreon, which you'll find linked in the description below. If this video was useful or you liked it, it'd be great if you could hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing for future videos from me. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!